Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last session of our 2020 GC3 Virtual Roundtable. My name is Michelle Jalbert, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the GC3. We've enjoyed sharing the work of the GC3 over the last 6 weeks and hope you understand now why more than 125 companies across the entire value chain all work with us to accelerate the commercialization and adoption of green chemistry. We encourage you to reach out if you are not yet a member. We are very grateful to our host sponsor, BASF, for their support of this entire 6-week event. BASF has long been a very active member of the GC3, and they've been a fantastic partner in putting together this virtual roundtable. We would also like to thank the sponsors of this week's commercialization theme, Dow, Johnson & Johnson, Lego Systems Incorporated, Lowe's, and RB. Today's discussion will examine perspectives from the C-suite. We will explore lessons learned from the disruption of the COVID crisis and consider how that experience can be applied to the challenges of commercializing new green or sustainable chemistry alternatives. You received everyone's full bios yesterday. So let me just quickly share names, titles, and affiliations of everyone participating in today's session. Our panelists include Lynette Chung, Chief Sustainability Officer at Covestro, Steve Crawford, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology and Sustainability Officer at Eastman, Anantha Desikan, Chief Technology Officer of the ICL Group, and Martin Vollmer, Chief Technology Officer, Clarion International Limited. Joel Tickner, GC3's Executive Director, will moderate the discussion this morning. Joel, let's bring you up on camera.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. It's a great honor and pleasure to be facilitating this panel. First off, I'd like to also add my thanks to our sponsors, BASF, and the other sponsors of this roundtable, and to thank the GC3 staff for all their hard work in putting together an amazing roundtable, a virtual roundtable during an unprecedented, difficult time. And I want to thank all of you for joining us over the last 6 weeks. One of the great values of the GC3 roundtable is the time for networking and connecting, and that's what brings people to our roundtables. We're doing everything in our power to bring that collegiality back to you and that networking opportunity. I'd encourage you, as Michelle noted, to join the GC3 if you're not a GC3 member yet. So our panel today includes 4 senior executives from the chemical sector to discuss how their respective firms have learned from the COVID experience and the pivots, disruptions, and other challenges and opportunities they've had. This has happened in a time of increasing pressure for addressing major sustainability challenges like circularity and climate change. Having worked with all 4 of our leaders today, I have incredible respect for their innovativeness, their strategic thinking, their collaborative nature, and their humility. Their companies are really working hard to respond effectively to the demands of the marketplace for more sustainable chemicals and products, and are committed to collaborating to get there, to get the solutions into the marketplace that the marketplace needs. So the way our session is going to work is I'm going to provide a little overview and background. Then we'll have each of our panelists present for 5 minutes. We will do some facilitated question and answer and discussion, and then lastly have question and answer from the audience. If you do have a question, we ask that you use the question box on your control panel and write your questions, and then we'll answer them during the question and answer session later on. During the summer, the GC3 hosted 4 discussions of our GC3 members regarding lessons for green chemistry commercialization from the COVID crisis. And we heard a number of lessons, including the ability to innovate and think about new opportunities that happen from the forced pause, the nimbleness to adapt, and the ability to redirect and grow new production lines quickly and identify new markets for products. Companies learned about the weaknesses in the supply chain that continuity is essential, and that more communication and collaboration leads to an increased pace of change. Companies were able to build new supply chain relationships quickly, and that the pandemic gave them more time to build those new relationships. That the problem-solving mindset can increase the rate of positive change, and the sustainability demands have only increased, and the wellness and concerns about climate change are increasing the demand for more sustainable chemistries. Next slide, please. So we're putting the context of the COVID crisis among another context, which is in December of last year, the European Union announced its Green Deal. And green chemistry or sustainable chemistry is at the heart of that Green Deal. Indeed, the European Commission last week published its chemical strategy for sustainability, which has the idea of safe by design or sustainable by design is key to that strategy. But that strategy includes climate, biodiversity, and what we'll hear later, it includes circularity. What we're going to hear later is that the companies that are on the call today, or the webinar today, are responding to those challenges with large, big visions for the future. Next slide, please. So over a number of months, all of the participants in this call were part of a discussion of about 10 chemical industry execs to try and address the challenges they face in driving commercialization of more sustainable chemistries, and how they can respond more effectively to the demands of the marketplace for these chemistries. Some of the challenges that we've heard are the reformulation, recertification, and regulatory, and also the steel in the ground cost, that there are different performances often of alternatives, and you need to show the value, that there's time to get to market and scale, and that often in the supply chain, there's a lack of willingness to absorb the costs or pay a premium for more sustainable options. And that often there's pushback, and that the regulatory environment may not support innovation. Next slide, please. But we've learned a lot from those dialogues too, so that those learnings can play into also the learnings from the COVID crisis, that chemical suppliers often have the solutions to respond to market demands, that early pre-competitive collaboration and alignment along the value chain to understand needs and demonstrate performance and sustainability benefits is critical, that it's often important to start with alpha movers and high margin products to show proof of concept, and that business model innovation is needed, including building brand and market activation strategies. And lastly, demand side interventions that accelerate pull-through and incentivize investment and accelerate time to market are key. So those are some of the themes we've been discussing in the GC3 over the last couple of years and over the summer during the pandemic. And now we'll hear from our experts in the field, our chief technology officers. So first off, let me introduce Steve Crawford from Eastman Chemical Company. Steve, please start your camera.
All right, thanks, Joel, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. Next slide, please. Let me just start out and provide an overview for anyone that's not familiar with Eastman, but we're a company that is, a global materials innovation focus group. We're actually celebrating our centennial this year. We had it back in the middle of summer. We're very proud of our heritage. Revenue just north of $9 billion with a global team approaching 15,000, just under 2,000 inside of what is the technology and sustainability group. The key for our organization is we're running an innovation-driven growth model, and the moral purpose that we push very hard through our culture and into our markets is we want our teams to wake up each and every day focused on improving the quality of life through the materials that we provide. So next slide. So obviously the challenges of COVID has impacted the R&D community on a global scale. You often read articles about 2020 being the lost year, but that's certainly not been the case. I think the industry as a whole has been able to adapt quite easily. From our perspective, we did have several labs down for a short period of time, but through layers of protection, from testing to hygiene to what we manage in terms of social distancing, as well as mask everywhere, mask all the time. We've been able to drive through, and we've been able to leverage technologies that, quite frankly, we should have already been leveraging, especially with our tech service group, as we interface with our customer base. I think the big thing for us at Eastman has been its driven focus. With limited access to the R&D labs, we really had to focus down on what's the most important. And for our organization, as you would imagine, all those programs had sustainability drivers. So next slide, please. So if you look at what is COVID, how's COVID impacted sustainability for Eastman, and specifically the circular economy, which is one of our major initiatives. Our consumer market insight group has been watching this very closely, and as you can imagine, we've had to adapt over the last 6 months, but there's a few key themes here. One is product safety has become a much bigger issue. I think with a lot of consumers at home spending a lot more time understanding what products they buy, the ingredients of those products, and you couple that with the EU Green Deal, as well as what we're seeing as an acceleration inside of China. We believe that the need for better transparency and the drive for more regulation, deregulation, is going to be a key innovation driver as we go forward. Also, we've seen around the circular economy, especially in the EU, single-use plastics and how to manage the global plastic waste problem has surfaced, and really you're finding that regions are looking for holistic solutions to this problem, which bring in molecular recycling for companies like Eastman that's in the spot that we're in. There's also been some indirect impacts. At the beginning of COVID, you saw a lot of shutdowns of manufacturing across the globe. Certain groups like NASA were quick to point out that there was a massive drop in CO2. This directly linked greenhouse gas to manufacturing rates. Also proved entitlement. So we know that climate is going to be a big driver of change in the industry. So scope 1, scope 2 for those of us who manufacture, as well as scope 3. And what we're doing to get our life cycle analysis down throughout our value chain. But in the end, what we would say is we're seeing consumers in general connect, health with environmental issues, with climate, and beginning to speak around one common theme that cut across all three. So obviously we'll be having our sustainability report that will come out by the end of the year. What you'll see is we'll have 3 key impact areas, one being climate, the other being people and society, which is around product safety, and the third, which will be circularity. So next slide. So the biggest shift for us is, if you'll just go ahead and build that up, the biggest shift for us will be around circularity. If you look over the last 12 months, we've shifted a substantial amount of our R&D into commercializing 2 technologies, leveraging molecular recycling to bring new products to the market, both with what we call our carbon renewal technology, which serves our cellulosic platform, as well as our polyester renewal technology, which serves our specialty copolyester. So the key takeaway being sustainability is going to accelerate the opportunity and the need to innovate from a material perspective substantially as we go forward. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Steve. Martin Bulmer is now up. Martin is the Chief Technology Officer of Clarion. Martin, thank you, and you can turn on your camera.
So I hope you can hear me and see me.
You're set.
All right, so going from east to west, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's a pleasure for me to join this roundtable today. And let me briefly introduce Clariant, a specialty chemicals company with worldwide operations based in Switzerland. We have an annual revenue of our continuing businesses. We're in a huge portfolio transformation right now of 4.4 billion Swiss francs and a workforce of close to 12,000 employees. And our main focus in the future is on three business areas. The first one is care chemicals with surface active chemistries for multiple markets in consumer care, personal care, industrial applications, crop solutions. And you can imagine those markets is a huge demand for green and sustainable solutions. The second business area, catalysis, where we serve heterogeneous catalysts, not only for the chemical industry, but also for refinery. And finally, our business area, natural resources, where we serve a number of specialty chemicals for oil, gas, mining applications, but also, for example, plastics and coatings applications, and even minerals for the purification of edible oils. Again, from this portfolio, and let's go to the next chart. Let me briefly talk about the challenges. You know all them. These are mega trends which we translate in challenges, and our industry can actually deliver the right solutions. And on the list of challenges, you see also COVID-19, which changed, of course, how we do business, how we run our operations, and I will highlight at least a number of our actions. To actually meet those challenges, there is a recipe, and this is still the list of the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 3 is health, actually. The investments of the pharmaceutical industry, which certainly looking into the pandemic in those areas significantly increase. But there is also for us in the chemical industry a great recipe when we look deeper into those objectives and all the recommendations. Our challenge is now to translate this into operational action. And there are opportunities. Joel talked about this. Steve also briefly touched the point. With the Green Deal in Europe, and we could even talk about now the initiatives in other regions, we know that there is now a plan in place despite the pandemic. And of course, a lot of the budgets will be dedicated to the recovery phase over the next couple of years, but still for the Green Deal over the next 3 years, there is more than 500 billion of funds reserved. And this is also an opportunity for us, knowing that there is an avalanche of, or I can even say a tsunami of legislation coming up. And we clearly see these legislation not only as risk, this is also a big opportunity for the introduction of green and sustainable chemistries and underpins our innovation programs we have in place. So there is a lot of homework for us to be done. On the one hand side, even in this difficult situation, to create sustainable value for our customers. And the way how we interact during this crisis is different. We use webinars to introduce new products to the market. We deploy digital tools. You can almost call them digital formulators to show a value proposition in a digital fashion to our customers, that they can actually also decomplex their formulations in moving forward. There is a brand behind, for example, in personal care, which we call Clarity. So what is important, I think also, the crisis puts a lot of pressure on us as industry, also securing funds in the long run. And I can only, ask, and mainly the people who join this roundtable today, the audience who is on the decision-making side, please secure funds during the crisis for research and development to secure innovation programs. There are many studies out there from consultancies, which tell us even the situation was different during the financial crisis 2009, but those companies who stay resilient in their R&D efforts will also get the payback in the long run. And bringing, in strong science and technology platforms, also chemistry and biotechnology together, where we at Clariant build also on agricultural residues as a new feedstock. This is biodiversity, this is very clear, but this will also be an important step towards circular thinking. This is from our perspective, and let me just build what Steve said, also a very important driver of our innovation programs. And I would not say that this is affected by the crisis right now. This program is in place and even independent on this overarching challenging situation we have. And finally, I think it calls for partnerships. It's more difficult, certainly, to identify the right partners along the value chain or even in the ecosystem, but still, when we look into circular thinking, into plastics recycling as an example, we use also the option, of all web tools to connect with people and to team up in a joint effort. And I hope that this roundtable today will also trigger the way we move forward and will even allow us to identify new and right partnerships. And with this, I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Martin. And our next speaker is Lynette, who is the new Chief Sustainability Officer of Covestros and has been active in the GC3 board. So welcome, Lynette. You can turn on your video now.
Lynette, we need your mic active.
Thank you very much. This is the part what one is missing all the time these days. Thanks for that. I suppose you can hear me now.
All good.
All good. Excellent. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Joel and GC3 for inviting me to be part of this roundtable. I'm very much looking forward to the discussions with the colleagues and also with the audience on how to bring more sustainable products to the market. So I was asked to give an overview of some lessons learned of COVID-19. And I wanted first to give you an overview of Covestro, share what the company is doing, focusing on, and then end with some reflections on the pandemic lessons. So if I just move to the next slide to introduce the company for everybody. Yeah. Covestro is among the world's largest polymer companies. We had in 2019 a bit more than 12 billion euro in sales, employs around 17,000 employees, 30 production sites globally, typically situated close to the markets, customers and suppliers, so a good global footprint. Something we're very proud about is our focus on innovation. We have 1,200 people that are employed in this department, and we are proud of the history of 80 years of ideas and invention. We have a large product portfolio on high-tech polymers, mainly polyurethane, polycarbonates, coatings and adhesives, and specialty solutions going into various industries. And if we move to the next slide, just to show you where we are relevant on which market segments, our products typically serve the automotive and transportation industry, construction, wood furniture, electrics and electronic appliances, as well as in sports, leisure, cosmetics, as well as the chemical industry itself. So it's quite a wide range of industries that we are serving as such. And the products are, for example, in lightweight vehicles, contributing to sustainable mobility, insulation materials for energy efficient buildings when we talk about the construction segments. And then we have things within the furniture business. This is soft foam that goes to mattresses and so on. Yeah, and I hope that gives you an idea about the company as such. And what I want to introduce to you today is to show where we are heavily focusing on for this year, as well as for probably the next decades to come. So if we move over to the next slide. So I think that the colleagues before me talked very much about climate change and the sustainable development goals. And of course, this is crucial for society as a whole and also for companies to follow. And in the midst of the pandemic in May this year, Covestro launched its new vision, its new company vision to be fully circular. And here, this is a reaction in terms of the need of actually addressing the global challenges of our time, such as climate change, the issue of plastic waste, circularity. We need to really move forward in terms of addressing those big societal challenges. So this very bold vision was launched. Regardless of the timing, it had been in preparation for quite some time. And we felt it was very timely to showcase leadership in terms of the pandemic, also looking forward to building back better. So what do we intend to do? Well, we intend to embed circularity throughout the company to really advocate and become a shaping force for circularity, and thereby also contribute to a greenhouse gas neutral economy. We will do this mainly by focusing on 4 areas. And firstly, we will aim to enhance the use of alternative raw materials in order to break away from crude oil, to leave fossil resources behind us. What we're looking at here is biomass, waste, and even carbon dioxide. A concrete example that Covestro has pioneered here is the use of carbon dioxide for producing important plastic components. The product is called Cardion, and so far we are able to replace fossil materials up to 20% in particular plastics. And we see already use cases for this in mattresses, in textile, as well as our automotive applications. So this is a very strong product of ours that we are promoting. Moving on, the circular economy will require that we address recycling topics. This will be key. So we will strategically develop more circularity-inspired innovation, as well as looking to advance in chemical recycling. Thirdly, I think it's clear, partnerships, collaborations are needed, cross-value chain, cross-industry. We talk about a very systemic shift with circular economy. So joint solution is a key area for us. And we're looking to continuously strengthen our existing partnerships, as well as building new partnerships in this respect. And finally, of course, our own operations. Here we will aim to increasingly use renewable energy in our production. And we have so far signed the largest power purchasing agreement to date with the Danish renewable energy provider Ørsted, and this will power our plants in Germany. So that's what we intend to drive for the next few years and decades to come, and really turn the company to become fully circular and to become a shaping force for circular economy together with partners and stakeholders along the value chain. So let me turn into what did we learn from COVID-19. Next slide, please. Yeah. The main lessons that I would see from the COVID-19 pandemic would be to say that coming together as a company and society, the need and capabilities that we have as a company and society as a whole. And I have grouped them under different elements here. First of all, of course, the measures that were needed. I think it goes for Covestro as well as for other companies that firstly, the protection of people was key. to start with in the pandemic, and continuously is very important. I think for chemical industry, we have a special readiness when it comes to crisis management as such, but here we could really see how important it was with the coordination across cross-functional and business teams. And here, of course, it was paired with very unpredictable dimensions. Another thing I would like to mention is the donation part. We have seen that happening cross industry, cross businesses, the importance of stepping in and to provide in-kind and money donation in support of societal objectives. One thing I'd like to mention here is that for us, it was also very important in view of employee motivation. I think here one can really see that doing good in times of societal crisis meant a lot for our employees and their motivation to continue to work. And that's something that I think that we also should consider going forward. When we talk about sustainability and climate change mitigation, it is about the fact that employees get very motivated in terms of doing good to support societal impacts. Of course, when we talk about COVID-19, we had, with the lockdowns and different practices that we had to adopt when it comes to social behavior, that of course acted as a catalyst for digital formats. So very quickly, actually, Covestro was able to build up new virtual formats, having different events within public affairs, media relations, marketing. We could see digital sales channels being used increasingly. So that really pushed us further into the digitalization arena. And I would say that's something that we probably would not have gone as fast otherwise. From a customer point of view, we had actually in Covestro not huge disruptions in our production or in supply chain. They were relatively small. We were able to continuously supply our customers. What we had to grapple with was more the reduced demand from our downstream industries. And at times that what we are going through in these extraordinary times, of course, we are in a scenario, this is not a business as usual anywhere, and how to actually adapt in terms of a business. So we could see that there were certain shifts in terms of demand. While demand was going down overall, there were certain areas where there were still some needs. So as an example here that I wanted to share with you was Covestro sharing its know-how for the use of 3D printing of mask holders to improve the wearability of medical safety masks is one example that, the fact that needs were uncovered as such. Another example would be the specialty films business that Covestro has. The specialty films business can supply to medical and non-medical applications. And specialty films can be used also for as materials for developing face shields, these masks that are for first responders. So during this time, also here, the business was able to actually convert some of the units originally intending to supply non-medical applications to where it was needed to actually produce those materials needed for the face shields. So that shift, we were looking for identifying those type of pockets. Where could we actually provide support, looking at our own production, our own products. And to conclude, what I wanted to say is that I think that many of us have seen how the environment has recovered during this extreme situation where we're under lockdowns. We could see the pollution levels decreasing now. I think that what I wanted to do here was to offer just a perspective. I mean, the fact that the environmental that the environment is recovering under these very severe circumstances is offering us a glimpse on the need of the scale of the challenge that we're up against here. And while I think that none of us are really looking into having the, all of us are looking into building back our economies. I think having seen that glimpse of environmental recovery, that really tells us about the need for building back better. So we really need to look into, now when we're looking to COVID-19 continuation or the post-COVID situation, that we build back better in this respect. So the conclusion in my regard is that with COVID-19, I would only say that more than ever is it important to look into how can we develop and further promote sustainable products to the market. This is what COVID-19 has shown us, and we need to further build back better. And we are committed to do so as Covestro, to deliver on the fully circular vision that we have laid out, and to do that in particular with partnerships and collaborations.
Great, thank you so much, Lynette. And our last panelist is Anantha Desikan, the CTO of ICL. So Anantha, if you can open up your camera.
Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're located. I think we're coming back full circle, east to west and back to east. I think my name is Anantha Desikan. I'm the CTO of ICL, and I'm joining you today from New York, which is actually Westchester County, New York, which is a suburb of New York City. I hope all of you are and your loved ones are safe during this pandemic. And also, I'd like to thank Joel and the GC3 team for providing me the opportunity to be a part of this panel. Actually, I'm honored to be joining the previous speakers on the panel. So I wanted to give you an overview of ICL. ICL, headquartered in Tel Aviv, Israel, is a global specialty mineral and specialty chemical company operating bromine, potash, and phosphate mineral value chains in a unique integrated business model. ICL extracts raw materials from well-positioned mineral assets and utilizes technology and industrial know-how to add value for customers in key agricultural, food, and industrial markets. As you can see, we are not 100 years yet, like Eastman, but we are close. Like, we have a 90-year history. And in 2019, we had sales of about $5.3 billion and have leading positions in target markets. Next slide, please. We are organized in 4 business divisions. Industrial Products is the world's largest producer of bromine and bromine derivatives. Bromine and brominated products are used in a variety of applications, as many of you know. Our phosphate division is in an integrated mineral chain that what you can term as rock to fork. So we start from the rock, make commodity phosphate fertilizers, and also manufacture and market specialty phosphates for different applications. And again, I'm trying to weave in some of the concepts of circular economy and sustainability and things like that as I go along. But you can see that many of these concepts are integral to our operations. Our potash division produces potash primarily from the Dead Sea. And in UK, we mine a unique mineral polysulfate, which is a unique organic mineral fertilizer. And lastly, in our innovative agro solutions, which is our specialty fertilizer division, we produce and market crop nutrition products that include controlled release fertilizers, which again is one of the key technologies that were identified as for sustainable agriculture. We also produce and market water soluble and liquid fertilizers and other specialty products. Next slide, please. So we have a global R&D footprint. Our innovation domains are in the area of food, crop nutrition, sustainability, e-mobility, and novel materials. And then also we are we're trying to get into the digital agriculture space. Being located in Israel, we are well positioned to leverage the innovation ecosystem of the startup nation of Israel, but we also try to leverage both internal and external ecosystems. As you probably noticed, we have a smaller footprint than Eastman, Clariant, and Covestro in terms of our innovation footprint, but we just launched an internal accelerator of sorts during the COVID times. And I would like to believe that we have about 11,000 colleagues focused on innovation in ICL. So we are catching up. Next slide, please. I'd like to use this slide also to try to address what are the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on ICL. So these are the ICL growth engines. Starting from the innovation domains, we have the current growth engines that we are focused on. So to the question of how the pandemic has affected our activities, I would say, I think like some of the other speakers, it has had a moderate effect in terms of both our business and R&D activities. We've taken all the precautions in terms of how our R&D activities happen during this time. We are back mostly on stream globally. The pandemic had limited supply chain issues for us, but what we also saw that it had supply chain issues in the area of food and agriculture. And this could have long-term effects with respect to some of our businesses. I think somebody mentioned the emphasis of transparency. So the emphasis of transparency in the agriculture and food value chain will increase. And this is something that we are exploring with our digital agriculture innovation. And this will get accelerated, I think, because of the pandemic. It is also too early to tell whether the area of alternative proteins may have been accelerated due to the pandemic, again, due to the issues around the supply chain issues around the food value chain. But we are looking at ways to leverage this in this area. Like everyone else, we are trying to leverage digital tools in some of the areas of interest, be it working with our customers or engaging with the external ecosystem. The use of virtual tools has greatly enhanced our reach and adaptability. The thing I'd like to say, I'm working remotely, and I've not been in Israel for the last 7 or 8 months, but I think some of the tools were already there. I think this pandemic has opened our eyes actually in some ways. And I think our customers and our external stakeholders will really demand us to be more effective in using these tools, as I think the previous speaker mentioned, I think. What I would like to say, during the pandemic, we launched our internal accelerator, and this has thrived with all the limitations and helped with our focus. Most importantly, it has become more clear that sustainability is a central theme for us, and this will guide both our business and innovation activities, I think. So I'll stop here and I'll be happy to join the discussion. Joel, thank you again.
Great, thank you so much, Anantha. What I would do is ask that our speakers, all of our panelists, turn on their cameras, and we'll take some time for some facilitated discussion, and then jump into question and answer from the audience in about 15 minutes. So if you do have a question for the panel, please use the question box on your control panel to do that. So great overview presentations, and certainly a few key themes I'd like to explore in further detail around the recovery and really this evidence of the scale of the challenge that came out from the pandemic, the issue of circularity and how that relates to the pandemic response, and then also this area of digitization and how that works. But let me start with just a more COVID direct related question. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences Chemical Industry Roundtable held a panel a few months ago about supply chain continuity during COVID, and certainly that was an issue pre-COVID, as we know from certain feedstock challenges. So has the COVID crisis forced or required your companies to rethink both supply chain continuity, but also feedstock and where you get feedstock from, both in terms of scale or single suppliers, or looking at more diversification of feedstock? How has that affected the way your companies are thinking, given that global channels could be cut off overnight. Not that that wasn't a problem before the pandemic, but it certainly highlighted that. Does anybody want to take a, Steve, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure, Joel, I will. I mean, just from a pure Eastman perspective, we had minimal supply chain issues, that were induced by COVID. I mean, I think what we saw predominantly in the U.S. is, at the beginning, there was a lot of disruptions in society in general. And so I think what we're looking at is, so how is that going to play out, in the coming years? Because obviously, as you spoke, there were a lot of companies that got disrupted. That's going to allow for innovation and opportunity to understand how Eastman can play and secure that within the communities that we operate. I think the indirect impact for us on supply chains is going to be more around climate, our climate objectives, our climate goals, and thinking about our scope 1, 2, and 3 overall objectives of what we're trying to accomplish. So that will definitely make us think differently in terms of supply chain build out as we go forward.
Great, thank you, Steve. Others have any challenges with either getting supply or with getting product to customers that you want to reflect on from the COVID?
I can only, from our side, confirm what Steve said. We had no significant disruption in our supply chain. Some, of course, issues are in cross-border transportation, but this was not a big issue. And we used, and our procurement department used the opportunity to analyze actually our supply situations and even to mitigate risk in case of single supply, which allowed us even to get to a more solid scenario in the future. But also, I think an important point, and this is a concern, there might be suppliers which run into financial problems, and this could certainly mean, in the one or other case, a disruption. And therefore, we have to watch out and just stay alert.
Great, Anantha, Lynette, anything to add in on that?
It's the similar situation here. Like I said, not very big on the supply chain disruptions. Actually, when it comes to that, it was more on the demand side of things. When I reflect upon feedstock going forward, I mean, however, what I'm thinking very much about is, of course, the circularity vision that we have set forward. So while we are talking about today's situation and the feedstock availability and how we're running our plants, this is fine. But when we are doing that shift towards renewable raw materials, towards actually plastic waste, that's a completely different type of supply chain we're talking about. And that's more what I am thinking of going forward. And that will take some time to actually connect between what we see in the waste markets and how we can get our plastics back, for example, polymers and these things. So the feedstock situation in a circular economy is completely different as to what we are now in.
Right, the whole continuity issue will change. So let me circle back to that question of circularity. I'm going to start with you, Anantha. It's interesting that we heard, all of the presentations focused to some degree on circularity, and I'm trying to understand. We certainly heard that the magnitude of the crisis became clear when the economy essentially stopped. But is there some connection that we're not seeing between COVID response and circularity, or is this just sort of the natural progression of where your companies were going anyway?
Yeah, I think honestly, I don't think we shifted any activity because of COVID. In terms of the circularity aspect of our strategy. So I think maybe like others have said, it might accelerate something, Joel, but it's not like we suddenly it dawned on us like we had to start something new or something. So I think this was a direction that we were headed anyway, I think. But it will make us rethink, what maybe have we missed some areas, or should we include something else? But I think this was a direction we were headed.
Steve, from Eastman's side, was there something that the pandemic did to you? Certainly noted that you focused in on a couple of R&D on a couple of product lines, but were there other drivers from the pandemic towards the circularity vision?
There was nothing that shifted strategy, Joel. I mean, we were down the path of circularity for, all the obvious reasons I think everybody on the panel have been viewing it. I mean, I guess what we believe to be true is that COVID has raised the overall awareness on health and safety. It's raised the overall awareness on environment. They're beginning to connect these issues. And so we believe that it's going to be an accelerator. Like Lynette talked, the bigger issue through COVID was different markets were impacted very differently, from aviation to care. That's two very different worlds. What we do believe is that, and a lot of this comes from the EU and the Green Deal and the overall movement is circularity is here to stay, right? And not just in plastics, but beyond. And I think companies will have to adjust. I mean, there'll be industries like automotive, like electronics, where it'll go beyond plastics to begin with, but it's going to go across the entire market. So we feel like it's a place that we need to establish, a strong position. And I think actually Martin and Lynette and them all said it. It's like it's going to take partnerships. Because there's one thing to have the technology, but being able to get the raw materials, cutting across value systems, collaboration is going to be key.
Great, thank you. Lynette, Martin, anything to add? Obviously, Lynette, you presented Covestro's new strategy. Was the timing going to happen pandemic or not, or did this accelerate?
No, I think it was going to happen regardless. I think it echoes what the colleagues have said here. I think that the challenges, that we saw pre-COVID, they remain, there. And what is, all these measures and the focus that we're having as companies, the challenges are that big. We're not going to shift our strategies right now because we know that we're in for the long run here. There are systemic challenges that we need to deal with. It's climate change, it's circularity, and other topics that we really need to shift the way we operate. So I think that was already embedded very much in the company's strategic thinking. So when we look at COVID-19 and the disruptions, the economic challenges we see in society as a whole, I think it's very important to keep our eyes on the ball and not, focus on the long-term challenges. We cannot shift, and I don't think anybody is if you want to be in for the long-term value creation and be part of a society here, you need to keep your eye on the ball in this respect. So what I can say is that while we may be looking into cost cuttings and these kind of things, cost savings because of the reduced demands and economic challenges we're in, that does not affect really the strategic focus that we're in. The investments, the technology developments, the focus on sustainable products remain there, I'd say.
Great. Martin, anything to add on that?
I would even say the pandemic shouldn't stop us from following our roadmaps, looking into sustainability. It's clear we all work on our climate neutral scenarios when it comes to our own operations, but when we look also into the value chains, and the way how companies, as we do, the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 targets combined with the environmental targets, there is a need for action today, actually. And therefore, I think it's important to continue and drive those plans and secure also, and this is an issue, the investments which are needed down the road. So in simple words, I would say no impact, and whenever those discussions might come up, follow our strategic plans.
Great. So let me jump to the bigger strategy, because I think we've heard from several of you that this increased focus on wellness, this increased momentum, that it hasn't really stopped progress, it's actually accelerated progress. And You know, both Steve and Lynette, well, several of you talked about the Green Deal and the idea of building back better. And is there, you know, what strategies could we start employing to accelerate, use this momentum to accelerate design, development, commercialization, and scale of green and sustainable chemistry solutions? What can we learn from this to push forward? For example, Covestro CEO has been very vocal on the need for a green deal that includes significant investment in climate reducing technologies. You know, aligning himself with NGOs and governments in that. So what else should we be doing? Do you want to start, Anantha?
I think you know, we have, you know, in the crop nutrition space and in the food space, we're trying to address some of these issues, like, you know, in terms of fertilizers, you know, more efficient nutrient use efficiencies and things like that. So it's a long journey to get these adapted. My feeling from my prior roles in the commercial side and flame retardants and other things are, if you don't have a value proposition that kind of combines both the greener side of things with the thing, it's very hard, right? Like, so that's where we have to start with. And so I think that's the focus I'm at least trying to address. Like, you know, if you don't have an economic value proposition, it's going to be hard. I don't think anything will change in that aspect. That's my. I'd like to hear others' view also in this case. At least that's my take on it, Joel. If I answered that question. Yeah.
And Steve, let me pivot to you. We certainly don't have the government leadership in this the way that Europe has with the Green Deal. What's driving Eastman in this, and what else could we be doing to keep accelerating this momentum?
Yeah, I think, Joe, where we've landed is we feel like we need to take a stronger leadership role in a few areas. I mean, advocacy, you know, also knowledge and education. I mean, to a lot of the issues that we face, you know, there is technical solutions that we need to get to market, but making sure that the entire ecosystem understands the intricacies of that. So I think the more that we can connect and educate what's possible is very important. And then, you know, partnerships and collaboration, which you've heard from everybody on the phone, right? Because in most cases, it takes everybody winning across the entire value system. So aligning on a strategic objective, because most technology will start out small. They'll be expensive to get through the chasm, if you will, so understanding where we're going. And so having those ecosystems with a longer term vision through channel partnerships are going to be key. So that's the areas that we're focused on, trying to be a stronger thought leader for the areas where we can make substantial impact.
Great. Lynette, I spoke for your CEO. What's driving that leadership position for Covestro?
I was just thinking to myself, if you really likened him with the NGOs and so on, you know, I think indeed the talk that we're having more and more is, you know, we need to recognize that companies and industry is getting closer because we're all focusing on the societal goals here today. So whether that's getting closer to NGOs or not, I mean, I'm going to leave that open because I do think that we all need to focus our mindsets on the overall systemic challenge that we have in front of us. And actually, what I would like to pick up on is what Steve mentioned, the ecosystem. I think, you know, what we see is that we can't do this on our own. We have articulated a very clear vision to become fully circular. Looking into that as to how we make our own company fully circular, there's a number of things that needs to be put in place, a number of investments that needs to be done. You need to connect the waste infrastructure. You need to actually talk to your recycling partners to see what are those waste streams that you actually can take and make useful into new products to say, and you need to connect with the customers also, and then further down the consumers also, and so on. So the thing is, you know, why is our talk changing in this respect? Is because we understand that in order to drive those type of solutions with those costs and the pricing and all that thing that comes with us, we need actually a big shift. That means connecting with the customers, inviting them and further down the value chain or upwards the value chain, and to be part of that challenge. At the end of the day, you can't carry those costs, your price investments on your own. You need to do some sharing in that respect. So our, the way we talk about that is to actually bring forward, can we make consortia? Or what can we do to actually move the needle when we talk about sustainability at the end of the day? It needs to be economically, feasible, but for all of the players in that ecosystem. So that's the big challenge that we have ahead of us.
Great. Do you want to follow on, Martin, from another European company's perspective of is this now what else could we be doing to drive this momentum forward?
I think there is always has to be a driving force, yeah. And what Lynette said, for example, circularity due to plastics value chain. We see this also when we look into the choice of feedstock we have. Yeah? We pioneer, for example, in the field of biomass utilization, but just building on agricultural residue as feedstock. And also here we see that a partnership is an important component. We move on very rapidly in the biofuel sector, looking into bioethanol, but also, sugars from agricultural residues, cellulosic sugars, could be the feedstock of choice for bio-based chemicals. And this is a lot of cost. Of course, when you look in those business cases, very clear. But I think partners have to team up to make this happen. And there are initiatives out there, just to name one, the World Economic Forum, the so-called low carbon emitting technologies initiatives, where lots of companies team up. And the result could be that there are new business models out there, new partnership models where we realize this pathway. And of course, those feedstock can open a variety of specialty chemicals. And then we are in the arena of green specialty chemicals. And we will see a number of new value chains down the road, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Do you have any examples you might weigh off right off the bat on innovative business models or partnership models?
I think it's clear that on the one hand side, if you start, for example, it's very simple with a production joint venture, then you just team up. You can even team up with peers here, but of course, bringing then downstream partners also in. You can create also win-win situations. Yeah, there are many options. Yeah, if one maps for a specific example partnership models down, it's just building trust, opening books, and finding the right way to move forward.
Great. I just want to remind our participants that if you do have a question, you can write it in the question and answer box on the control panel. But I'm going to continue with the question that I heard from Lynette, which is this question we've been having a discussion about for many years, which is incumbency. And all of you are driving sustainable solutions, and the question is, is the market willing to pay for them? Are they, what are the barriers in that to try and drive those solutions? And Anantha, do you want to reflect on, what are there factors standing in the way of you getting the most sustainable chemistries you're making into the marketplace, and how do we address those?
I think as Steve said, and also Lynette and Martin said, like again, it's more about engaging the whole value chain, I think, right? Like, so it's like, I cannot just say that we are developing a sustainable solution, I want to keep everything, and it has to be a win-win partnership. And how does it, we have to look at the whole, so it's looking at the pain points of the value chain, if you will, in terms of the sustainability issue. And I think we've taken some approaches before where we have failed at it because we've only looked at it in our perspective, right? Like, so we've looked at it in our perspective, and then it has not been successful. But if you look at the entire value chain perspective and try to move the needle, if that's the right term, or try to be the thought leader and try to get this thing. That's the way I see from my experience. I think it's that's how I see that you can make a change of this incumbency question. It is a risk for us too, but at the same time, sharing the risk and the winning and the opportunity, I think.
Steve, from your perspective, has this been an issue for Eastman as they develop their more sustainable options? I mean, I heard the webinar the other day on the new textile and H&M starting to work with it. I mean, how have you been trying to address those incumbency challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's already been said, Joel, but I think what we try to encourage through our partnerships is time is the most critical variable, right? And so, better transparency across the entire value chain is very key, and also having a longer term vision of where you're going to get to. And I think if you see where a lot of new products coming into the market struggle, it's where it gets held up on you can't create value at every node in the value chain, over IP issues. And I think what we got to learn as a collective team in the value chain is time's a key variable, right? I mean, if you think about the area under the curve in terms of value creation for a product that the market needs, how do we go much faster? And I actually think that beyond COVID, although I think COVID's an accelerator, getting back to your question around will the consumers pay for it? I think what we're seeing is coming out of COVID, the consumers are leaning much heavier towards safer products, things that they feel more comfortable with, what they call higher valued product lines. And so I think that you will see from an economic perspective that it begins to get easier.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let me circle back to, it was a good segue from Steve to Lynette and to Nantha. One of the questions from a participant was about how, in thinking about circularity, both of you have chemistries in your feedstock chemicals that some would consider challenging or problematic. How do you think about the innovation side when dealing with circularity and then trying to address potential problems with the feedstock chemistries?
It's to whom?
Well, you could start, Anantha, if you want to.
So in terms of feedstock, we are, again, we are not like a feedstock dependent like maybe Eastman or Covestro, but I can, for us, we look at our materials issue in terms of circular, like, again, if you look at fertilizers, I don't know whether that's a feedstock thing issue or not, but I think, how can we improve the efficiency of phosphate utilization in terms of agriculture or potassium or nitrogen? So it will have an impact on bulk commodity sales, right? But then if again, it's about the issue. It's not circularity, but also reducing the impact on the environment in that sense, right? Like that's something that we are looking at. In terms of other material additives, we are looking at circularity in how can our additives play in the role of circularity. I think in flame retardants, we've done quite a bit of work in that area, I think, in terms of recycling and being pioneers in polystyrene recycling, for example, right? Like, so we're looking at that aspect. So I don't know whether it's not a feed stream question, but I think this is some of the issues that we're addressing.
Well, I think it goes back to the issue of the sort of chemicals of concern in the circular economy, and how do you sort of address those considerations? Then, Lynette, let me raise that with you. I've certainly had those conversations with your colleagues about, if you're, how do you sort of balance the safety and the circularity in the work you're doing?
Yeah. I think first of all, when we talk about chemical safety, I think that is key to ensure that what we are putting on the market and how we're producing, using it, and so on, that it is safe to be used, that we're managing that well, to say. So that always need to remain key. And when we talk about it in a more circular economy now, I think, and I think it is there also already today about ensuring safety of the product across its full life cycle. So we need to ensure that we're able to manage our chemicals safely across the product life cycles. Yeah? And that will also be applied when we start looking into what that means in the circular economy. We need to ensure similarly there that our materials are safe to be used, reused, recycled, and so on, with the technologies that we may want to put on stream, with how we're operating today also, so on. So I think that there is, a number of elements here that we need to really recall, and that is indeed there is a commitment to ensuring product safety across the life cycle already as it is, to say, and that will not change when we move into a circular economy. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'll ask Stephen Martin this question. You know, there are often smaller innovators in the startup world that have solutions to start, you know, that would help support the larger companies' goals towards sustainability and circularity. And the question is, what's the best way to get in the door with your companies? How do these smaller startups connect with an Eastman or a Clariant to introduce their solutions to you? Do you want to start, Steve? And then we'll go to Martin.
No, I mean, I think that's part of what we're all, communicating, Joel, which is our ecosystem's got to get better because speed's important. So about 3 years ago, we actually started our own incubator, our innovation inside our corporate innovation group, where we're out searching for. We've tried to get much better at saying what are the top 10 corporate platforms and initiatives, and what's the unmet needs and the themes. We need to continue to get better at that. But we realize that if time's the key variable, those partnerships are extremely important, regardless of how we do it. I think from, how can they connect with us better? We're very open, right? I mean, we're a very collaborative culture. Reach out. We can certainly connect to the right spot. And if it's within the core themes, I think for everybody on the phone as a technology or sustainability leader, is just being clear publicly where your company's strategy lies and what problems you're trying to solve to allow that connection to become easier.
Yeah, and I can tell you that all of the speakers on the phone are incredibly accessible people. So Martin, how are you thinking about this?
I have a very simple answer to startups with exciting technologies knock at our door. So we have on the one hand side our open innovation portal, that we can digitally very easily. But if there is an exciting startup out there, call me directly.
Great. Anantha, I know you go to a lot of universities to try and find new opportunities. What's been your strategy?
So I think similar to what Martin just mentioned, right? Like, so we have a clear open innovation strategy, and we are looking at both universities and startups, and we're learning a lot, and trying to balance this portfolio of working. I think 5 years ago we were more academic centric, but now I think we're trying to balance. But yeah, we are open and engaged with the startup ecosystem and partnering as much as we can, I think.
Great, thank you. Let me take another question from the audience. Remember, we have about 5 more minutes for a question, so if you do have a question, please write it to the question and answer box. Lynette, a question from the audience was, given the new EU chemical strategy for sustainability, and part of that is strengthening the REACH framework and linking more to circularity, and is this, what will be the impact of this on innovation in green and sustainable chemistry, or what's a company like Covestro hoping that it comes out of it?
The chemical strategy for sustainability was just adopted last week by the European Commission. And indeed, there are some elements that we would welcome in this respect. And part of that is, of course, the enforcement implementation parts that they are strengthening up, but also the innovation proposals that we can see there. I think what I'm seeing there is this element of safe and sustainable by design, and the focus on, having more sustainable chemicals entering into our ecosystems or markets, or however we want to call it in the working economy here. And I think that per se is a good intention to say, and that there's also availability of funding around that, recognizing some difficulties that industry may have. What I think will become crucial is to have a discussion on putting those criterias right. So what do we understand with sustainable by design? And we need to look at chemicals per se, and also the applications and the functionality of the chemicals. That's number one. Number two, we also need to consider overall sustainability impacts across the chemical life cycle, as well as the overall application market, to say. So I do think that there is a potential there to drive sustainable chemistry forward, but we need to really look into having a good balancing there in between about what are the criteria and how will we move on it from a policy point of view, innovation point of view, a market point of view, so that we don't overdo it also. So there's a lot of things that still need to be clarified from my point of view, and we will be happy to share the work that we have been doing in Covestro in thinking around sustainable chemistry and how we move on our chemicals and materials in the value chain now.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump back to a question that, well, several of you mentioned the idea of digitization or digital tools. We had a panel a couple of weeks ago on digitization and really companies are using digital tools more effectively in their firms. So, my question is, how are you sort of, given, COVID sort of forced this in some ways, or accelerated it, but how are you using digital tools, for example, Anantha, in molecule selection or molecule evaluation, or looking at health and safety aspects, or even engaging with supply chain transparency, or is that a growing area at ICL?
It is growing. We are looking at it's not like, so we've been doing this all along, right? Like with the right selection, but we are more into using some of the developing areas of machine learning and artificial intelligence in maybe even the reaction pathways, also addressing emerging trends for molecule development. So we've just started some of these things, in terms of the digital transformation, but it's based on the foundation of the green chemistry principles, right? Like this kind of a thing. But we are just starting to look at some of these things, like in terms of the material chemical development, using some of the advanced things like machine learning and aspects like that. So that's something that we are exploring with partnerships, actually. Yeah.
Great. Steve at Eastman, are you digging into them as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar. So I'll just take it from product out. So we've been using digital tools inside the manufacturing area for quite some time. Still a lot of opportunity there to continue to work on cost. I think the two areas that we're focused on that's probably newer is we're leveraging digital tools, artificial intelligence in our new product development, especially in our formulations and more fundamental application research side, where we're able to now use artificial intelligence to help direct molecular design. And I think that's an emerging area, one we will continue. And then the other is just around customer service in general. There's just more data available. And so, how can you bring digital tools from a service perspective to streamline your value chain as well? So that's the two areas that we're focusing now.
Great, perfect. So let me just ask all of you a last question. We'll go around starting in the order we started. If you had a magic wand and you sort of leveraging your lessons from COVID and this unique point in time with all of these drivers, what would you like to see change that isn't, is a barrier to your work right now, that would help accelerate it significantly. We'll go around and start with Steve.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll do it by example, Joel, which is circularity is a big driver for us, as I've mentioned. You know, I think the most significant barriers are just broader education around circularity, especially circularity of plastics. And, you know, we have a very strong, you know, strategy around what good looks like in terms of, you know, waste plastic to leave fossil feedstocks in the ground. Every technology's got to have a lower LCA, and we got to upscale the products, right? And what we need is partnerships and everybody that understands, you know, how significant the problem is and the order of magnitude of solutions that are needed from an infrastructure perspective and from a market perspective. So if I had a magic wand and just could, you know, basically share the vision as well as you know, why this is good, not just inside the market, but for society long term, that would be where I would direct it.
Great, thank you. Martin?
Yeah, Joel, it's a difficult question, yeah, to talk about a dream or, you know, flight to the moon. I would even leave it now independent on the COVID situation, yeah, because clearly I think, especially the technology arena, we want also personally connect with our partners, yeah, and this is now limited at this point. Therefore, I would see completely independent from COVID. What I would like to see, looking into our supply chain, looking into our value chains, that we play on the feedstock side in the right way. Where can we actually move from petrochemical feedstock into biomass? Lynette brought the point also, even valorization of CO2, which is very important when we look at climate neutral scenarios. And I think my big dream out of this is that we get into scenarios where we have solid business cases, which justifies for a set of partners to invest.
Great, thank you. Lynette?
It's getting, you know, listening to the colleagues, they're really great, already magic wands that they are wishing upon here, and that I truly hope will happen also. So I will be pretty simple and straightforward here. For me, it would really be about getting together as, you know, company and society is what I said before, but I would like to expand on that. And that is really the company, the industry as a whole, as well as our value chain and the societal perspective, that we, you know, build that ecosystem that is needed. And it will require, you know, passion, persistency from all of us. And we need to build that kind of a societal partnership, really, with industrial, business, and people at the forefront for the sake of our planet, really. So very simple and kind of more of a, what can I say, visionary type of a viewpoint here. Yeah.
Great. Anantha, you get the last word.
Yeah, it's tough to add to the all the things, but you know, if there is a magic wand for three of them to figure out all these things, I think what I would like to do is, I think the magic wand is to speed to market. I think with all the partnerships, if we can speed a few things and you know, build this business case quickly, I think that will be a big transformation. I think in my, you know, that's the magic wand I would like to see, the pace, you know, increase the pace of things and things like that.
Wonderful. What a great way to wrap up. I want to thank the four of you for your time, your honest and open, your visions, and I think this was a great way for us to sort of think about the strategic development we take in GC3 moving forward. Certainly the conversation we've had over the last year and a half has only been accelerated by the COVID and obviously all the other challenges we're facing. So thank you for your time and commitment. Michelle.
Great. Well, thank you for an amazing panel discussion. It does wrap our last session of our GC3 Roundtable. So for the audience, if you missed any of our earlier discussions, these really substantive sessions are all available on our website for viewing at your convenience. So we'd like to thank again all of our sponsors, especially our host, BASF. We appreciate all that you did to help bring this to life and for being part of this 6-week event. And just a message to anyone in the audience who is not yet a GC3 member, let's connect and discuss opportunities to work together. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.